The evening shift at La Lumiere was supposed to be unremarkable. Daniel Hayes moved between tables with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd learned to carry exhaustion like a second skin. His white server's jacket was pressed, his movements quiet, his face carefully neutral. Most customers never really looked at him. They saw the uniform, not the man, and that was exactly how he preferred it. At table 7, a group of men in expensive suits laughed too loudly, their voices cutting through the restaurant's carefully maintained atmosphere of hushed elegance. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over marble floors, and soft classical music drifted from hidden speakers. This was the kind of place where a single meal cost more than Daniel made in a week, where wealth wasn't just displayed, it was assumed. Daniel approached their table with a tray of drinks, moving with the invisible grace that good servers cultivate. He'd worked here for 8 months now, ever since his daughter Emma started kindergarten, and he needed evening hours that wouldn't conflict with her schedule. The job paid barely enough to cover rent, groceries, and the growing stack of medical bills from his daughter's asthma treatments. But it was honest work. It was safe work. It was the furthest thing possible from what he used to be. "Excuse me, gentlemen," he said quietly, beginning to place glasses on the table. "Your cocktails." The man at the head of the table, Marcus Holloway, according to the reservation, didn't even glance up. He was mid-story, gesturing expansively with a cigar that probably cost more than Daniel's car payment. "So I told the board, either you accept my terms or I walk. And you know what those spineless—" Daniel's hand, steady despite the weight of the tray, accidentally brushed the edge of Holloway's sleeve as he set down a glass. It was the lightest contact, barely noticeable, but Holloway stopped mid-sentence, his expression shifting from animated to contemptuous in an instant. "Did you just touch me?" Holloway's voice dropped, suddenly cold. Daniel stepped back immediately, his face carefully blank. "My apologies, sir." The table was. "Do you have any idea how much this suit costs?" Holloway stood, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of presence that came from a lifetime of being obeyed. "More than you make in a year, I'd bet." The restaurant had gone quiet. Conversations at nearby tables died away as heads turned. Daniel felt the familiar tightness in his chest, that old instinct trying to rise up, but he pushed it down. He couldn't afford trouble, couldn't afford to lose this job. "I apologize, sir," Daniel repeated, his voice even quieter. "If there's any damage, the restaurant will." "The restaurant?" Holloway laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think money fixes everything? You think an apology makes it okay for someone like you to put their hands on someone like me? Someone like you?" Daniel heard what wasn't being said, saw it in the curl of Holloway's lip, in the way his friends leaned back with anticipatory grins. This wasn't about a suit or an accidental touch. This was about power, about a man who'd probably never been told no in his life, finding someone he could humiliate without consequence. "I understand you're upset," Daniel said, still keeping his voice level. "Please, let me get the manager." Holloway moved fast, his hand shooting out to shove Daniel's shoulder. It wasn't a hard push, just enough to make him stumble back a step, to establish dominance. "I don't want your manager. I want you to understand your place." Daniel straightened slowly, his hands remaining at his sides. Something in his posture had shifted, though most people wouldn't have noticed. His center of gravity had dropped slightly. His weight had redistributed. Years of training had carved patterns into his muscle memory that couldn't be fully erased, only suppressed. "My place," Daniel repeated softly, "is doing my job and going home to my daughter. I'm not looking for trouble, sir." "Your daughter?" Holloway's smile widened, and something cruel entered his eyes. God help the kid growing up with a father who scrapes and bows for tips. What kind of man are you teaching her to respect? The words hit harder than the shove had. Daniel felt his jaw tighten, felt that old darkness stirring, the part of him he'd worked so hard to bury. He thought of Emma, 5 years old, with her gap-toothed smile and her collection of library books. She didn't know what her father used to be. She only knew the man who made her breakfast, walked her to school, and read her bedtime stories in funny voices. Maybe some viewers here know what it feels like, he thought, to swallow your pride for someone you love. If you do, I genuinely appreciate if you'd share your own story in the comments. Not for engagement, just because sometimes it helps to know you're not alone in choosing dignity over pride. I'm teaching her, Daniel said quietly, that real strength is knowing when not to fight. Holloway laughed, a sharp bark of derision. Real strength? Listen to this philosopher. He turned to his friends, who chuckled obediently. This is what's wrong with society. People like him thinking they're noble for being weak. Thinking poverty is some kind of virtue. The restaurant manager, Richard, had finally noticed the commotion and was hurrying over, his face tight with concern. But before he could intervene, Holloway turned back to Daniel, and in a movement so casual it might have been reflexive, he kicked. His foot connected with Daniel's shin. Not hard enough to seriously injure, but with enough force and contempt to make the message clear. You're nothing. You're beneath me. You'll take this because you have no choice. The restaurant went absolutely silent. Daniel didn't fall. He didn't even shift his weight. He simply stood there, looking down at where Holloway's expensive Italian leather shoe had struck his leg, and something changed in his eyes. The carefully maintained neutrality drained away, replaced by something ancient and cold. When he looked up, Holloway actually took a step back, some survival instinct he didn't know he possessed suddenly screaming warning. "Sir," Daniel said, his voice still quiet but carrying a weight it hadn't held before. "You should sit down. Are you threatening me?" Holloway's voice rose, trying to reclaim his dominance through volume. "Do you know who I am? I could buy this restaurant. I could buy you. You're a man," Daniel said simply, "who just made a very serious mistake." Richard had reached them now, his hands raised placatingly. "Mr. Holloway, I'm so sorry for any inconvenience. Daniel, perhaps you should take a break. Your employee assaulted me," Holloway snapped, though everyone had seen exactly what happened. "He's threatening me. I want him fired, and I want—" He reached out to grab Daniel's collar, to physically emphasize his point, to reassert the power dynamic that had suddenly shifted in ways he didn't understand. Daniel moved. It happened so fast that most people couldn't follow it. One moment Holloway's hand was extended, the next he was on his knees on the marble floor. His arm twisted at an angle that made it clear any resistance would result in a broken joint. Daniel stood behind him, holding the lock with minimal pressure, his expression completely calm. "I asked you to sit down," Daniel said quietly. "This is your last warning." The restaurant erupted. Holloway's friends jumped to their feet, shouting. Other diners gasped or pulled out phones. Richard was trying to call for security, his voice high with panic. But Daniel didn't move, didn't increase the pressure, didn't do anything except maintain perfect control. "You broke my arm," Holloway shouted, though his arm was clearly intact. "I'll sue. I'll destroy you." "Your arm is fine," Daniel said, his voice clinically detached in a way that was somehow more frightening than anger would have been. "If I wanted to break it, it would be broken. Now, are you going to sit quietly and wait for security? Or do I need to make sure you can't get up?" Something in his tone, the absolute certainty, the complete lack of emotion, made Holloway stop struggling. He'd heard that tone before, though not directed at him. It was the voice of someone who'd done violence professionally, who understood exactly how fragile the human body was and precisely how to damage it. Security arrived, two large men in dark suits who took in the scene with professional assessment. Daniel released Holloway immediately, stepping back with his hands visible, non-threatening. But his posture remained coiled, ready, and both security guards noticed. They'd worked in high-end establishments long enough to recognize the difference between someone who'd been in a few bar fights and someone who'd been trained. "He attacked me." Holloway was scrambling to his feet, his face red with humiliation and rage. "This waiter assaulted me. I want him arrested." "Sir," one of the security guards said carefully. "Several diners filmed what happened. We saw you kick him. We saw you try to grab him. I barely touched him. And he... Did you see what he just did? That's not normal." That's not some random waiter. Daniel stood silently, his face carefully blank again. But inside he felt the weight of exposure settling over him like a familiar coat. He'd known this could happen. Known that someday someone would push too far, and the reflexes he'd spent years suppressing would take over. He just hoped he could make it longer. Hoped Emma could be older before the truth came out. The second security guard was looking at him with narrowed eyes. "Sir, I need to ask, do you have any martial arts training?" "I used to," Daniel said quietly. "A long time ago." "What kind of training?" Daniel hesitated, then decided there was no point in lying. "Military, specialized combatives. And before that, competitive fighting. But I left that life." The restaurant had gone quiet again, but this time the silence felt different. People were looking at him with new eyes, reassessing. The quiet waiter who'd taken their orders and refilled their water glasses without comment suddenly looked dangerous, even standing perfectly still. Holloway was staring at him with a mixture of fear and fury. "You didn't think to mention that? You're walking around here, some kind of trained killer, and nobody knows." "I'm a waiter," Daniel said simply. "I take orders. I serve food. I go home to my daughter. What I used to be doesn't matter." "Doesn't matter?" Holloway's voice was shrill now. "You could have killed me. If I wanted you dead," Daniel said, his voice still quiet but carrying absolute conviction. "You would never have seen me move. I put you on the ground and controlled you until security arrived. That's the opposite of violence. That's restraint." Richard was wringing his hands, clearly torn between defending his employee and managing his wealthy patron's fury. "Mr. Holloway, please, let's move to my office and discuss." "I'm not discussing anything," Holloway snapped. "I'm calling my lawyer, and the police. This man is dangerous." "This man," a new voice cut in, clear and authoritative, defended himself within his rights. Everyone turned to see a woman in her early 40s, dressed in an elegant business suit, stepping forward from a nearby table. She held up her phone. "I recorded the entire encounter. You kicked him. You attempted to physically grab him. He used the minimum force necessary to protect himself and restrained you without injury. Any lawyer who saw this footage would laugh you out of their office." Holloway stared at her, his mouth working silently. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," the woman said coolly. "I'm a prosecutor. I see assault cases every day. If anyone should be arrested tonight, Mr. Holloway, it's you." The shift in power was almost visible. Holloway looked around the restaurant, seeing phones pointed at him, seeing the expressions of other diners, not sympathetic but disgusted. His friends at the table were suddenly very interested in their drinks, no longer meeting his eyes. "This is ridiculous," Holloway muttered, but the fury had drained from his voice, replaced by the petulant resentment of someone realizing their power had limits. "I'm leaving, and I won't be coming back." "That's probably for the best, sir," Richard said, his voice carefully neutral now that the balance had shifted. Holloway straightened his jacket, trying to salvage some dignity, then stalked toward the exit. His friends scrambled to follow, leaving cash on the table without waiting for the check. The restaurant door closed behind them with a soft chime that seemed absurdly gentle after the tension. If you felt something shift during that moment, when the truth came out and everything changed, if you understood why that instant mattered, would you mind hitting like? Not as a favor, but as a marker. Sometimes it helps to know who else recognized that turning point. Daniel stood motionless, feeling the weight of every eye in the restaurant. He wanted to leave, to walk out and never come back, to disappear back into anonymity. But he had a shift to finish, had bills to pay, had a daughter who needed stability more than she needed a father with pride. "Daniel," Richard said quietly, pulling him aside, "we need to talk." "I understand if you need to let me go," Daniel said, already mentally calculating how long his savings would last, how fast he could find another job. But Richard surprised him. "Let you go? That guy's been coming here for months, making staff uncomfortable, treating people like servants. Nobody had the nerve to stand up to him." He paused, studying Daniel's face. But I do need to know, is there any legal trouble in your past? Anything I should be aware of? Daniel shook his head. Clean record. I left the military honorably. Left competitive fighting without controversy. I've been out of that world for 6 years, since before Emma was born. Emma's your daughter? 5 years old. Kindergarten. Asthma problems. She's why I need this job. Richard was quiet for a moment, then nodded. Finish your shift. We'll talk about security protocols later, but you're not fired. Just maybe try to de-escalate next time before it gets to the restraining part. I tried, Daniel said simply. He kicked me. Yeah. Richard glanced toward the door where Holloway had exited. Yeah, he did. The rest of the shift passed in a strange blur. Daniel moved through his tables mechanically, but everything felt different. Diners who'd witnessed the confrontation kept glancing at him. Some with nervousness, some with curiosity, a few with something that might have been respect. The prosecutor who defended him left a generous tip and her business card, with a note. If you need a witness statement, call me. But it was the quiet that bothered him most. The carefully maintained invisibility that had made this job bearable was gone. Now people saw him. Now they wondered. Now they knew he was more than what he appeared to be, and that knowledge changed everything. When his shift finally ended, Daniel changed out of his uniform in the staff room, moving slowly, his body aching in ways that had nothing to do with the brief physical confrontation. He was tired in his bones, tired in his soul, the kind of exhaustion that came from years of trying to be someone different, someone better, someone worthy of his daughter's love. His phone buzzed. A text from his neighbor, Mrs. Chun, who watched Emma on his late shifts. Emma's asleep. No rush, but she had a rough night with her breathing. Might want to check her inhaler prescription. Daniel closed his eyes, leaning against the locker. More medical expenses. More calls to the insurance company. More careful calculations about whether they could afford both the medication and the rent. This was why he'd taken the job at La Lumiere in the first place, despite the long hours and degrading treatment, because it paid slightly more than other restaurants and every dollar mattered. He thought about Holloway's words. What kind of man are you teaching her to respect? The kind who shows up, Daniel thought fiercely. The kind who swallows his pride and does what needs to be done. The kind who left violence behind because bringing a child into the world means choosing what kind of father you want to be. But tonight, for just a few seconds, the old Daniel had surfaced, the one who'd been trained to read violence in a person's body language, to respond faster than thought, to end threats with clinical precision. That Daniel was dangerous. That Daniel had walked away from a promising military career because he'd seen where that path led, what it cost, what it turned you into. He'd thought he could bury that version of himself completely. Thought he could become just Daniel Hayes, single father, working 2 jobs, living paycheck to paycheck but sleeping clean. Tonight had proven him wrong. The video would spread. He knew how these things worked. By morning, it would be on social media. Waiter destroys millionaire in restaurant fight. Or maybe, former fighter works as waiter. You won't believe what happens next. The details would get exaggerated. People would speculate about his past. Some would try to find him. And Emma would eventually see it. Maybe not now, but someday. She'd see her father taking down another man. See that cold precision in his movements. And she'd have questions he didn't know how to answer. Daniel gathered his things and headed out into the night. The December air was cold, his breath misting in the glow of streetlights. His car was parked 3 blocks away. He couldn't afford the staff lot fee, and he walked quickly, hunched against the wind. Tomorrow he'd have to deal with the fallout. Tonight he just needed to get home, check on Emma, make sure she was breathing easy, and try to pretend that the careful life he'd built wasn't starting to crack. But as he walked, he couldn't shake the memory of Holloway's face. That instant when arrogance had turned to fear. When the wealthy man had realized that money didn't protect you from everything, that power had limits. There'd been something grimly satisfying about it. Something that made the old part of Daniel stir with recognition. That was the most dangerous thing. Not the physical skills that remained after years of disuse. Not the training that could never be fully erased. But the part of him that had felt right in that moment, that had responded to the threat with something deeper than conscious thought. He'd left that life because he was afraid of who he'd become if he stayed. Tonight, he'd been reminded why that fear was justified. The streetlight above him flickered as he reached his car, and in its stuttering glow, Daniel caught his reflection in the driver's side window. For just a second, he saw the man he used to be looking back, younger, harder, without the weight of responsibility and exhaustion that had carved lines into his face. Then the light steadied, and he was just Daniel Hayes again. Single father, waiter, man trying his best. He got in the car, started the engine, and drove home through empty streets, trying not to think about what tomorrow would bring. Behind him, in the glowing rectangle of La Lumiere's windows, the night shift continued. Tables were cleared, glasses were polished. The restaurant returned to its careful equilibrium, as if nothing had happened. But the video was already uploading. The story was already spreading. And somewhere in the city, Marcus Holloway was making phone calls, his voice tight with humiliation, planning revenge against the waiter who'd embarrassed him. Neither of them knew it yet, but the confrontation at table 7 was just the beginning. Some things, once set in motion, couldn't be stopped. Some truths, once exposed, couldn't be hidden again. Daniel Hayes had spent 6 years trying to be invisible. Now, whether he wanted it or not, people were going to look. The apartment was quiet when Daniel let himself in, just after midnight. The living room was small, worn furniture arranged neatly around a TV that was older than Emma. Mrs. Chun had left a lamp on, and in its soft glow, Daniel could see the evidence of his daughter's evening. Coloring books on the coffee table, crayons scattered across the floor, a cup of water on the side table with one of her allergy pills still floating at the bottom. His chest tightened. She'd fought taking her medicine again. Mrs. Chun was dozing on the couch, her reading glasses perched on her nose. A Korean drama paused on the TV screen. She stirred when Daniel closed the door, blinking awake with the practiced ease of someone who'd raised 3 children of her own. "Daniel," she said softly, keeping her voice low. "Long night." Something like that. He set his keys carefully on the hook, trying to slow his breathing, to shift mental gears from the confrontation to the gentleness Emma's world required. How was she? Mrs. Chen's expression grew concerned. Her breathing got bad around 9. I gave her the inhaler, but she was wheezing for a while. It scared her. She paused. It scared me too, honestly. Has the doctor said anything about increasing her medication? Daniel felt that familiar spike of helpless frustration. They want to try a different inhaler, but the insurance company is fighting the approval. They say the current one is sufficient. The current one that leaves her gasping for air? Yeah, that one. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, suddenly more exhausted than he'd been all night. I'll call them again tomorrow. Thank you for staying with her. Mrs. Chun stood, gathering her bag. She was 72, a retired schoolteacher who'd lived in the building longer than anyone. She'd started watching Emma after Daniel's ex-wife had left, refusing to take payment beyond the occasional grocery run or help fixing things in her apartment. She's a sweet girl. I wish I could do more. You do more than enough. At the door, Mrs. Chun paused, her hand on the knob. Daniel, is everything all right? You seem different tonight. He almost told her, almost explained what had happened, the confrontation, the video, the exposure. But what would be the point? She'd worry, and there was nothing she could do about it. Just tired, he said. Thank you again, Mrs. Chun. After she left, Daniel locked the door and moved through the apartment, checking windows out of old habit, noting exits, clearing sight lines, behaviors he tried to unlearn but never quite could. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building that had been old when he moved in and hadn't improved since. The walls were thin enough that he could hear the couple upstairs arguing in muffled Spanish. The pipes rattled when anyone in the building used hot water. But it was clean, it was relatively safe, and the landlord hadn't raised the rent in 2 years. Emma's room was the smallest bedroom, barely large enough for her twin bed, a small dresser, and the bookshelf Daniel had built from scavenged wood. But he'd painted it her favorite color, a soft lavender that had taken 3 coats to get right, and covered one wall with glow-in-the-dark stars arranged in actual constellations. When she couldn't sleep, he'd lie next to her and tell her stories about the pictures the stars made. Adventures of heroes and journeys, always with happy endings. She was asleep now, curled on her side, one hand clutching her stuffed rabbit. The night light shaped like a moon cast gentle shadows across her face. She had her mother's features, delicate nose, high cheekbones, but her temperament was all her own, curious, stubborn, endlessly empathetic. She cried when characters in her picture books were sad. She made Daniel stop the car once to help a turtle cross the road. He sat carefully on the edge of her bed, listening to her breathing. It was slightly raspy, a subtle wheeze on the exhale that most people wouldn't notice, but that sent alarm bells ringing through his parental instincts. Her inhaler was on the nightstand, next to a half-finished glass of water and the current library book. Something about a bear who learned to read. "Daddy." Her voice was sleepy, barely a whisper. "Hey, sweetheart." He brushed hair back from her forehead. "I'm sorry I woke you." "You didn't. I was just resting my eyes." It was what she always said when he caught her awake past bedtime. "Mrs. Chun said you'd be home late." "I'm home now." She shifted, making room, and Daniel lay down beside her, careful not to take up too much of the small bed. She immediately curled against him, her head on his chest, and he wrapped his arm around her, feeling his racing heart begin to slow. "Did you have a good day?" he asked. We learned about penguins. Did you know they have a special gland that makes oil to keep their feathers waterproof?" "I didn't know that." "It's called the uropygial gland." She pronounced each syllable carefully, proud of mastering the word. "And emperor penguins can hold their breath for 22 minutes. That's impressive. Not as long as you, though." She tilted her head up to look at him, her eyes serious in the moonlight. "You can hold your breath forever." Daniel smiled despite everything. "Not forever, Em. Nobody can do that. But longer than anyone else. I timed you in the bathtub once. You did 4 minutes and 12 seconds. He'd been practicing breath control that day, maintaining the skills that didn't require a gym or equipment. Hadn't realized she'd been watching. That was just playing around. "Can you teach me?" "When you're older." He tucked the blanket around her more securely. "Did you remember to take your medicine tonight?" Her silence was answer enough. "Emma, it tastes bad, and it makes my throat feel funny." "I know, but it helps you breathe." "I was breathing fine." "Mrs. Chun said you had trouble around 9. She was quiet for a moment. "It wasn't that bad. She worries too much." "She worries because she cares about you. Because I can't be here, and she's looking out for you." "I wish you didn't have to work at night." "Me too, sweetheart." "Is it because we don't have enough money?" The question landed like a punch. Daniel had tried so hard to shield her from their financial struggles, to make their circumstances feel normal. Like everyone lived in small apartments and bought generic cereal and couldn't afford the fun-filled trips at school. "We have enough," he said carefully. "We have what we need. But not enough for the new inhaler. I heard you on the phone with the insurance company. You were using your angry calm voice." His angry calm voice. Jesus. She noticed everything. "That's grown-up stuff," he said. "You don't need to worry about it." "But I do worry." Her voice got smaller. "I heard Mrs. Chun talking to Mrs. Rodriguez. She said the medical bills are piling up because of me. That you're working yourself to exhaustion." Daniel closed his eyes, feeling something crack in his chest. "Emma, look at me." She tilted her head up, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Listen to me very carefully," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "You are not a burden. You are not a problem. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, and I would work 100 jobs if it meant keeping you healthy and safe. Do you understand? But if I didn't have asthma, then you wouldn't have asthma. But you do, and that's nobody's fault. Not yours, not mine. We deal with it together. Okay?" She nodded, but he could see she wasn't entirely convinced. Too smart, he thought. Too aware for her own good. "How about this?" he said. "Tomorrow's Saturday. No school. We'll sleep in, make pancakes, and go to the library. You can pick out 5 new books instead of 3. Her expression brightened slightly. Really? Really? Can we get hot chocolate after? He mentally calculated what was in his wallet. Maybe enough if they split one. We'll see. That means no. That means maybe. He kissed the top of her head. Now go to sleep. It's way past your bedtime. It's way past yours too. I'm a grown-up. I'm allowed to stay up late. That doesn't seem fair. Most things aren't. You'll get used to it. She yawned, settling back against him. Daddy, do you ever wish things were different? Like, if you could change anything, what would you change? The question surprised him. What makes you ask that? I don't know. Sometimes you look sad, like you're thinking about something far away. Daniel was quiet, holding his daughter in the moonlit room, thinking about the choices that had led him here, the violence he'd walked away from, the relationship that had crumbled under the weight of his past, the career he'd abandoned, the man he used to be versus the man he was trying to become. I'd make sure you never got sick, he said finally. I'd make sure we never had to worry about money. I'd make sure you could have everything you wanted. I don't want everything, she said sleepily. I just want you to be happy. The simplicity of it, the uncomplicated love, made his throat tight. I am happy, he said. When I'm with you, I'm happy. Even when I don't take my medicine? Even then. Though I'd prefer if you did. She giggled, a soft sound that might have been the best thing he'd heard all day. Okay, I'll try harder. That's all I ask. Her breathing deepened, evened out, and within minutes she was truly asleep. Daniel stayed where he was, not wanting to move, not wanting to disturb the perfect peace of this moment. Outside, the city hummed with distant traffic. The radiator clanked as it cycled on. Somewhere a siren wailed, growing closer then fading away. This was his world now. Small rooms and quiet evenings. Library books and medical bills. His daughter's breathing, raspy but steady. The most important sound in his universe. And somewhere out there a video was spreading. His face, his actions, his carefully hidden past spilling into public view. By morning, everything might change. But that was a problem for later. Right now, Emma was safe. She was warm. She was sleeping peacefully in his arms. Nothing else mattered. Daniel closed his eyes and tried to rest, but sleep wouldn't come. His mind kept replaying the confrontation. Not with regret exactly, but with a weary recognition of inevitability. He'd known this would happen eventually. Known that you couldn't really bury who you used to be, only postpone the resurrection. People like Holloway existed everywhere. Men who'd been born with advantages and mistook luck for superiority. Who needed to dominate, to diminish, to remind themselves of their power by exercising it on those who couldn't fight back. And people like Daniel, people who'd been made into weapons, who'd learned that violence could be clean and controlled and terrifyingly efficient. They never really stopped being dangerous. They just chose not to be. Every day, every interaction, every moment someone pushed or provoked or threatened. It was a choice, and Daniel chose peace, chose patience, chose to walk away. Until walking away meant letting someone disrespect him in front of a room full of people. Until walking away meant teaching his daughter that strength meant accepting humiliation. Maybe he'd made the wrong call tonight. Maybe he should have taken the kick, filed a complaint, let the system handle it. But when Holloway had tried to grab him, when that line between words and physical violation had been crossed, the old training had taken over, and for those few seconds he'd been who he used to be. Controlled, precise, absolutely certain of what he could do. And that certainty was the scariest part. Emma stirred in her sleep, making a small sound, and Daniel gently rubbed her back until she settled. Her medication was wearing off. By morning, she'd be wheezing again, and he'd have to decide if it was bad enough to take her to urgent care, which meant a copay they couldn't easily afford, or if they could manage it with the rescue inhaler until Monday. These were the calculations of his life now. Medical versus financial risk. Present pain versus future stability. The countless small choices that define single parenthood. Every one of them a tiny bet on tomorrow. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He carefully extracted it without disturbing Emma. checking the screen. A text from Richard. Video's gone viral. 2.3 million views and counting. Call me when you're up. Daniel stared at the message, his stomach sinking. 2 million views. Jesus Christ. He opened Twitter without meaning to, and there it was, trending #restaurantfighter. The video had been posted from multiple angles. Some focused on Holloway's kick, others on Daniel's response. The comments were a mixture of support and speculation. That takedown was clean. Whoever that waiter is, he's got serious training. The millionaire deserved it. You can't just kick people because you're rich. Does anyone know who the waiter is? We need his story. Former military has to be. That's not self-defense class training, that's combat technique. Daniel closed the app. He should have felt vindicated, public opinion seemed to be on his side, but instead he just felt exposed. Every view was another person seeing his face, noting his skills, potentially recognizing him from his old life. He'd fought professionally for 3 years before joining the military, competing in a regional circuit under a different name, Daniel "Ghost" Hayes. He'd been good, too. Undefeated in his first 12 matches. Known for his technical precision and ability to stay calm under pressure. The nickname had come from his fighting style. He didn't brawl. He simply appeared where you weren't looking and ended the fight before you realized what was happening. That had been a different person. A young man with more anger than sense, trying to prove something he couldn't name. The military had refined that anger into discipline, had taught him that violence was a tool, not an identity. And becoming a father had finally shown him what he actually wanted to prove, that he could be more than what he'd been made into. But the internet didn't care about personal growth or redemption. It wanted a story, and the story of a secret badass working as a waiter was too good to resist. By morning, someone would probably recognize him. His old fights would be dredged up. His military record would be speculated about. Privacy, once lost, was nearly impossible to reclaim. Emma murmured in her sleep, and Daniel put his phone away. Whatever was happening online could wait. This moment, the weight of his daughter against his chest, the sound of her breathing, the simple fact of her existence. This was real. This was what mattered. He'd deal with tomorrow when it arrived. Tonight, he was just a father, lying in a too-small bed, listening to his daughter sleep. And if the world wanted to see him as something else, as a fighter, a threat, a viral video, that was their problem. He closed his eyes and focused on Emma's heartbeat, steady and strong, and tried to believe that everything would be okay. But deep down, in the part of him that had been trained to assess threats and calculate odds, Daniel knew the truth. Tonight had changed something, had set things in motion that couldn't be stopped. Marcus Holloway wasn't the type to let this go. Men like him never were. And Daniel, despite all his efforts to be someone different, was about to remember why he'd been called Ghost, whether he wanted to or not. Saturday morning arrived with pale winter sunlight filtering through the worn curtains of Emma's room. Daniel woke slowly, his body aching from sleeping in an awkward position on the too-small bed. Emma was still curled against him, but her breathing had gotten worse overnight, the wheeze more pronounced, her chest rising and falling with visible effort. He eased out from under her carefully, tucking the blanket around her shoulders, and went to get her nebulizer from the bathroom cabinet. The device was old, secondhand from a medical supply store, but it worked. He brought it back to her room, set it up on the nightstand, and gently shook her shoulder. Sweetheart, we need to do a breathing treatment." She blinked awake, saw the nebulizer, and her face crumpled. "Do we have to?" "Yeah, we do. Your breathing sounds rough." "I don't want to." "I know, but it'll help." With the resigned acceptance of a child who'd been through this too many times, Emma sat up and let him place the mask over her face. The nebulizer hummed to life, producing the fine mist of medication that would open her airways. She leaned against him, holding the mask in place, and Daniel wrapped an arm around her, rubbing her back in slow circles. They sat like that for 15 minutes, not talking, just breathing together. This was their routine when the asthma flared up: early morning treatments, careful monitoring, the constant calculation of whether this was something they could manage at home or something that required a doctor. When the medicine was gone and the nebulizer clicked off, Emma's breathing was easier. Not perfect, but better. She pulled the mask off and leaned her head on his shoulder. I'm hungry. Pancakes, remember? With chocolate chips? Do we have chocolate chips? No. Then regular pancakes. With syrup. With syrup. In the kitchen, Daniel made pancakes from a mix, the cheap kind that required adding water and came in a plastic bottle. They weren't as good as homemade, but they were fast and Emma didn't complain. He poured batter onto the electric griddle he'd bought at a yard sale, watching bubbles form on the surface, trying not to think about his phone sitting on the counter. He turned it off before going to sleep, but the moment he turned it back on, the messages would flood in. Richard's text was just the beginning. There'd be more. There were always more. Daddy, you're burning them, Emma said from her seat at the tiny kitchen table. He flipped the pancakes, swore under his breath when he saw the too dark undersides. I like them crispy. You like them burned. That too. She giggled, and the sound made everything feel a little lighter. They ate together at the table, Emma drowning her pancakes in syrup, Daniel drinking instant coffee that tasted like regret and caffeine. Through the window, he could see the street below. People walking dogs, cars searching for parking, the bodega on the corner opening its security gate. It was a normal Saturday morning, the kind they'd had 100 times before, but it felt different, like the calm before something inevitable. So, Emma said, swinging her legs under the table, library and hot chocolate? Library, yes. Hot chocolate. He checked his wallet. $32. Enough for gas, maybe a cheap lunch, and bills that wouldn't wait. We'll see. She didn't argue, which somehow made it worse. She just nodded and took another bite of pancake, and Daniel felt the familiar burn of inadequacy. Other fathers could promise their kids hot chocolate without checking their wallets. Other fathers didn't have to budget every dollar, couldn't afford the field trips or the birthday parties or the summer camps their kids wanted to attend. But other fathers also hadn't walked away from careers that paid well because the price of that money was their soul. Hadn't chosen the harder path because the easier one led somewhere dark. These were the thoughts Daniel tried not to have, but Saturday mornings, with their quiet hours and domestic routines, made them harder to avoid. After breakfast, Emma changed into jeans and her favorite sweater, the purple one with a unicorn on it. Daniel helped her brush her hair, pulling it back into a ponytail while she winced dramatically at every slight tug. She was particular about her hair, wanted it smooth and neat, and he'd learned through trial and error how to manage the tangles without making her cry. These were the skills that mattered now. Not how to break a hold or disable an opponent, but how to do his daughter's hair. How to make pancakes that didn't burn. How to recognize the sound of her breathing going wrong before it became an emergency. His phone buzzed on the counter. Then again. Then a third time in rapid succession. Emma looked at it. Are you going to check that? Later. It might be important. Nothing's more important than our morning. But she was right, and they both knew it. Daniel wiped his hands on a dish towel, picked up the phone, and powered it on. The screen immediately lit up with notifications. 63 messages, 42 missed calls, emails and social media alerts flooding in faster than he could process. His stomach dropped. The first message was from Richard. Call me. Media's calling the restaurant asking about you. The second was from his former unit commander in the military, Hayes. Saw the video. You holding up? The third was from a number he didn't recognize. Hi Daniel. I'm a producer for Good Morning America and we'd love to interview you about the restaurant incident. And on and on. Reporters, old friends, people from his fighting days he hadn't talked to in years, even a few sponsors from his competition circuit asking if he was considering coming back. Is something wrong? Emma asked, her voice small. Daniel forced his expression to neutral, the way he'd learned to control his face in interrogation resistance training. No, sweetheart. Just work stuff. You don't look like it's work stuff. You look like you looked when Mommy said she was leaving. The observation was so accurate it hurt. He set the phone down. I'm fine. Promise. Just more messages than I expected. Nothing for you to worry about. But Emma was watching him with those too perceptive eyes, and he could see her cataloging his tension, his concern, filing it away as one more thing her father was trying to protect her from. "Library," he said firmly, grabbing his jacket. "We're going now before it gets crowded." The library was 6 blocks away, a brick building that had been beautiful once, but now showed the wear of budget cuts and deferred maintenance. The children's section was in the basement, a colorful space with bean-bag chairs and murals of storybook characters painted on the walls. Emma loved it here, loved the ritual of scanning her card, picking books, finding a quiet corner to preview her selections. Daniel let her wander the aisles while he sat in one of the parent chairs near the window, his phone still buzzing in his pocket. He should turn it off again, should ignore everything until he had a plan. But the messages kept coming, and his curiosity, or maybe his sense of dread, finally made him open Twitter. The video had exploded overnight. Now it had over 8 million views, spawning countless commentary threads and think pieces. The hashtag restaurant fighter was trending worldwide. People had started digging into his background, sharing screenshots from his old fights, speculating about his military service. Some of the analysis was frighteningly accurate. Look at his stance at 013. That's Army Combatives Level 4 or higher. This guy was a military hand-to-hand combat instructor. I trained with Daniel Hayes at Fort Benning in 2012. Best fighter in the unit. Heard he left to take care of his kid. Respect. Found his old fights under the name Ghost Hayes. He was undefeated. Retired suddenly in 2016. Now we know why, became a dad. Daniel felt the walls closing in. His anonymity, his carefully constructed normal life was disintegrating in real time. Every search, every shared post, every comment was another piece of his privacy stripped away. And then he saw the post that made his blood run cold. Marcus Holloway has filed assault charges against the waiter, claiming he was attacked without provocation. Also filing a civil suit for damages, emotional distress, and defamation. Hashtag restaurant fighter. Daniel read it twice, trying to process. Assault charges. A lawsuit. Holloway wasn't letting this go. He was escalating, using every tool of wealth and influence to retaliate. His phone rang. Richard's number. "Richard," Daniel answered quietly, aware of Emma browsing nearby. "Daniel, I don't know how to tell you this, but I saw. He's pressing charges." "Yeah." His lawyer contacted our owner this morning. They're claiming the video is edited, that there was an altercation before the recording started, that you used excessive force. It's all bullshit, but he has expensive lawyers and I don't. The owner's willing to provide the full security footage to prove you're in the right. And that prosecutor lady, Ms. Reeves, she's already offered to be a witness. "But Daniel," Richard paused. "This is going to get ugly. Holloway's connected. He's already gotten articles pulled from 2 news sites that made him look bad. What does that mean for me?" "It means you need a lawyer. A good one. Can you afford—" Richard stopped, apparently realizing the answer. "Listen, I know some people. Pro bono attorneys who take cases like this. Let me make some calls." "I appreciate it." Daniel watched Emma at the bookshelf, completely absorbed in reading the back of a picture book, oblivious to the crisis unfolding around her. "Richard, am I going to lose my job over this?" "No, absolutely not." The owner was clear. "You defended yourself, you didn't start it, and we're standing behind you. But," another pause, "you might want to take a few days off, just until the media circus dies down. We've had reporters camped outside since this morning. A few days off. Unpaid, which meant a few days without income." "I understand." "I'm sorry, Daniel. Not your fault." After he hung up, Daniel sat there, phone in hand, trying to think. He needed a lawyer, needed to respond to the charges, needed to protect his daughter from all of this, and he needed to do it with $32 in his wallet and no safety net. Emma appeared at his side, holding a stack of 5 books. "I'm ready." He looked at her bright smile, her innocent excitement over library books, her complete trust that her father would fix whatever was wrong. And something in him hardened, settled into that old determination that had made him a good fighter, a good soldier. Holloway wanted a war? Fine. Daniel had walked away from violence, but he'd never forgotten how to fight. And this time, the stakes weren't pride or glory or proving anything. This time, it was his daughter's future. "Okay, sweetheart," he said, standing up and taking her books. "Let's get these checked out." They went to the circulation desk, and the librarian, a middle-aged woman with reading glasses on a chain, scanned Emma's card and the books with practiced efficiency. But when she looked up at Daniel, her expression changed slightly. "Recognition. You're him," she said quietly. "The father from the video." Daniel felt Emma tense beside him. "Just checking out books," he said evenly. "I think what you did was brave," the librarian continued, lowering her voice so others wouldn't overhear. "My son's a waiter. The things people say to him, the way they treat him, someone needed to stand up. I was just trying to do my job." "Well, you're a good example for your daughter." She handed the books across the desk. "These are due in 3 weeks. Enjoy them." Outside, as they walked back toward the apartment, Emma was quiet. Too quiet. "You okay?" Daniel asked. "That lady knew you. From a video." There was no point in lying. "Yeah." "What video?" "Something that happened at work last night. Someone was rude. I handled it, and someone filmed it. It's not a big deal." "Is it on the internet?" "Yeah." "Can I see it?" "No." "Why not?" "Because you're 5, and it's not something 5-year-olds need to see." She was quiet for another half block. Then, "Are you in trouble?" Daniel stopped walking, crouched down to her level right there on the sidewalk. "Listen to me. Sometimes adults do things they think are right and other adults disagree. That's what's happening now. But no matter what happens, I'm going to be okay. And you're going to be okay. I promise." "You can't promise that." "Not for sure." She was right, and they both knew it. But he said it anyway. "I promise." They walked the rest of the way home in silence, Emma clutching her library books, Daniel's mind racing through scenarios and options. When they reached their building, there was a man waiting outside, mid-50s, dressed in a suit too nice for the neighborhood, holding a briefcase. Daniel's instincts screamed warning. He put himself between the man and Emma without thinking. "Daniel Hayes?" the man asked. "Who's asking?" "My name is Lawrence Trent. I'm an attorney." He pulled out a business card, handed it over. "I'd like to represent you in the matter with Marcus Holloway." Daniel glanced at the card. The firm name meant nothing to him. "I can't afford an attorney." "Pro bono," Trent said. "I saw the video. I've already spoken with the prosecutor, Ms. Reeves, and your manager. Mr. Holloway's claims are groundless, and I'd like to help make sure he doesn't use his resources to railroad you." "Why?" "Because I'm tired of wealthy people thinking they can buy their way out of consequences." Trent's expression hardened slightly. "And because I used to be in the military too. Marines. I recognize what you did in that video. That wasn't rage, that was training. You protected yourself without causing injury. That's rare." Daniel looked at Emma, who was watching the exchange with worried eyes, then back at Trent. "We should talk inside." They went up to the apartment, Emma immediately going to her room to sort through her new books while Daniel and Trent sat at the small kitchen table. Daniel made coffee, the same instant kind from this morning, and listened while Trent explained the situation. "Holloway's filed 2 complaints," Trent said, pulling documents from his briefcase. "Criminal assault charges through the police, and a civil suit claiming damages. The criminal charges won't stick. There's too much video evidence of him being the aggressor. But the civil suit is trickier. He's claiming emotional distress, damage to his reputation, even, and I can't believe this, fear for his safety." "Fear for his safety," Daniel repeated flatly. "He's trying to paint you as a dangerous individual who shouldn't be allowed around the public. His lawyers are digging into your background, military service, fighting record, trying to build a narrative that you're unstable." "I walked away from all that." "I know, and that's our defense. You're a single father who works hard to support his daughter. You were assaulted while doing your job, and you responded with the minimum necessary force. Every witness, every angle of video supports that. But Holloway has money and connections. He's already gotten sympathetic coverage in some outlets, framing himself as a victim. And he's patient. He's willing to drag this out, make it expensive, bet that you can't afford the time or stress of a long legal battle. Daniel thought about Emma in the next room, about the bills on his counter, about how precarious their entire life was. What do I do? We fight back. We file a countersuit for assault, harassment, and defamation. We make it clear you won't be intimidated. And we make it public. The more attention this gets, the harder it is for him to control the narrative. Trent leaned forward. But I need to know, is there anything in your past that could hurt us? Anything he might find and use? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. I fought professionally before the military. Undefeated record. I walked away when I got serious with Emma's mom, before Emma was born. My military record is clean, honorable discharge, no disciplinary actions. Since then, I've worked regular jobs, paid my taxes, stayed out of trouble. And Emma's mother? Gone. Left when Emma was 6 months old. Said she couldn't handle the responsibility. Haven't heard from her since. Trent made notes. Any custody disputes? Child support issues? No. She signed away her rights. It's just us. Good. That's clean, defensible. Trent looked up from his notes. Daniel, I'm going to be honest. This is going to get worse before it gets better. Holloway's the type to escalate. He'll try to make your life hell. Your job, your housing, maybe even. He'll look for leverage. Daniel's jaw tightened. My daughter is off limits. Legally, yes. But if he goes after your custody, claims you're unfit because of the fight. He does that? Daniel said quietly, his voice dropping to something cold and final. And I won't need your legal services anymore. Do you understand me? Trent held his gaze, then nodded slowly. I understand. And for what it's worth, I don't think it'll come to that. Custody plays badly in court when there's no grounds. Just be prepared for him to try everything else first. They talked for another hour, going over strategy, documentation, what to say to the media if they cornered him. Trent left his card, promised to file the initial responses to Holloway's suits by Monday, and assured Daniel that this was winnable. But after he left, Daniel sat at the table, looking at the legal documents, feeling the weight of it all pressing down. He'd thought walking away from his old life would mean peace. Thought choosing quiet dignity over violence was the answer. Now he was being dragged into a different kind of fight. One where money and influence mattered more than truth. Where a rich man's lies could destroy everything he'd built. Emma appeared in the doorway, holding one of her library books. Daddy? Will you read to me? Daniel looked at his daughter, at the one person in the world who needed him to be okay, to be strong, to somehow make this work. Yeah, sweetheart. I'll read to you. They curled up together on the couch, Emma leaning against him while he read about a mouse who went on an adventure. His voice was steady, the story simple and comforting. Emma's eyes grew heavy, her breathing evening out as she drifted toward sleep. And Daniel, holding his daughter while the afternoon light faded and the city hummed outside their window, made a decision. He'd fight Holloway. Not with fists, that's what the man wanted. A chance to prove Daniel was dangerous. But with patience. With truth. With the same stubborn refusal to quit that had made him a good fighter. If Holloway wanted to destroy him, he'd have to work for it. And Daniel, who'd survived combat zones and professional fights and the hardest challenge of all, single parenthood, wasn't going to make it easy. The war had started. But this time, Daniel wasn't fighting for himself. He was fighting for the little girl sleeping in his arms. And that made him more dangerous than any millionaire could understand. If you made it this far, you're part of a story about what happens when quiet strength is pushed too far. If that resonates with you, if you believe in people who choose peace until peace becomes impossible, consider subscribing. Not for me, but because these are the stories that remind us who we are when the world demands we become something else.